could say that the Falx is the counterpart weapon of the backhand blades. I'm having a little bit of an issue trying to find out what's my favorite, which one of them do I like the most. Just right at that, the design the Falx, I think that it's a little bit more flashy, a little bit more nice to look. But the difference in between them is that, for example, the backhand blades, if you use them with the proper Ash of War, the base Ash of War of the weapon, they have iframes. And those iframes are very generous and they allow for a lot of versatility. However, it doesn't have that much damage, it has decent damage. On the other hand, the Falx has quite a little bit more damage on the Ash of War, and not a little bit, it's just tremendous amounts of damage with the Ash of War. If by some reason you manage to complete the animation of the Ash of War and the weapon and the bleeding that it has, the native bleeding that it has, you can very well be dealing 10k damage in one single hit. That is, if you manage to actually finish out the animation, because the animation is going to trigger bleeding, the high damage that it has, and yeah, there's that. The Ash of War would have like 3 stages. I would like to say it's actually 2. It's just that one of them you can charge it. It's this very tracking. Amazing tracking. Like the weapon, the Ash of War has amazing tracking. As a matter of fact, because of this reason, this weapon is one of the most hated weapons right now in PvP. Is it very useful in PvE as well? Well, yes, because it has lots of versatility. Depending on the animations and how well you're acquainted with the boss that you're fighting, you can take advantage of the situations and the punishing attacks that you have out there to know when can you charge the Ash of War, when can you not charge the Ash of War, and use it at your leisure whenever you would want to use it. One of the downsides of the weapon is that it has bleeding. It has 55 bleeding. You can't scale that bleeding because it doesn't have arcane scaling, and you cannot change the Ash of War of the weapon. That is why it's not as versatile, for example, as the backhand blades. It's still very powerful. And the bleeding, more than being a consequential little something that is going to be present around here and sometimes, it's actually going to be a very strong weapon of this, pardon redundance, weapon, because it's a very fast attacking weapon. And if you combine the weapon fast attacks with the Ash of War that does this flurry of attacks after you use the initial charge of the Ash of War and then proceed with a heavy attack, it has this flurry of attacks that more often than not, at all times, 100% is going to proc bleeding onto the enemy, regardless of boss or elite enemies, which is by all means one of the cool things about this weapon, is that it's amazing, tremendous amazing for high armor enemies that are lurking out in the world, the elite enemies, because it has amazing stagger damage with the Ash of War. It doesn't have that much poison damage, but it has tremendously high stagger damage. So with those elite enemies that you find out there in the world, as soon as you start the animation, it's going to most likely one-shot them. And what I mean by one-shot them is just kill them with one tap of the Ash of War. Thankfully enough, the build is also pretty straightforward, because it's not a stat-hungry build, because this is a weapon that benefits the most out of Dexterity, and because of that we can have lots and lots of versatility, a very nice, well-rounded build right here. As you can see right here, we have 75 Dexterity, the weapon has a B scaling in Dexterity, and it does take advantage of that hard cap reaching from 60 to 80, opposite to different weapons that don't have that much scaling. This one actually is going to yield you 50 points in damage from 60 to 80, so by all means it's a very good idea to reach that hard cap at 80 Dexterity. We have 75 in here because we're using Millicent Prosthesis, so as soon as you use the Millicent Prosthesis, that is going to turn our Dexterity to 80. And then we have the Vigor at 60, Mind 29 to be able to spam our Ash of War. Endurance, it's not a heavy weapon, so 20, it's just more than enough, and that is going to be more than enough for you to be able to use a armor that is going to yield you the 51 points by threshold that you have for you not to get staggered all the time. The equipment, stuff that I'm using with this build. As you can see right here, I'm using a whole bunch of stuff. I have a Wakizashi right here. The only reason is because I have a Bloodhound Step right here to avoid the huge AoE of the enemies. Depending on the situation, depending on the enemy that I'm fighting, I'm going to change my finger seal towards here or here, depending, like I said, on the situation. If I need to use the Bloodhound Step quickly, I wouldn't like to have an extra weapon right here, so I would change it over here. And then for the shield, the Mesmer Soldier shield doesn't require strength, and it has nice God boost. We don't have strength, so it's actually a nice idea. And just something to parry, which I always carry with me. As for the armor, it should be fine with anything that would allow you to bypass the 51 poise threshold. And you can actually play and toy around with this right here, because the equipment at the end of the day that we have right here, even though that it is quite a bit of things, usually combined all of these things together, it's going to be like 15 pounds, give or take. So it's really not that heavy, the equipment that we have in our hands. The talismans. There's a very interesting selection of talismans that we have right here, and more often than not, they are going to be focused on increasing our damage as much as humanly possible. Shadow of Alexander, that's a must. Millicent Prosthesis, that's a must. And then the rest of the ones that I have for you right here, they are recommendations that you can pair, and that situationally they are actually quite nice. Well, I would say that the Wing Sword Insignia, it's a must as well, because that stacks with the Millicent Prosthesis, and like I said, this is a very fast attacking weapon, and the flurry of attacks is always going to sustain that extra damage percentage when you're doing consecutive attacks. So the final ones, the Lord of Blood Exaltation, because sometimes, well, more often than not, you are going to be proccing bleeding, so that's a little bit extra damage right there. The Godfrey Icon, it enhances the charge portion of the Ash of War, not at all times, because like I said, you're going to be deciding when are you going to charge it and when are you not. Ideally, more often than not, when you're fighting against bosses, you're not going to charge it that much, depending on the animations and how well acquainted you are with the boss. But if you can pull it off, that's extra little 20% more damage. But that's situational as well, so it doesn't necessarily have to be here. And then the rest of the things that you would usually have here, like for example the R3's favorite +2, if you feel that you don't have like enough heavy armor, or the Graveyard Arsenal, Turtle Talismans, there's a whole bunch of things that you can place in here. Just make sure that you do have the 3 basic must-want talismans that you should have. I forgot to mention, very important, that you raise your faith to 15. You would see on the, if you go back, you would see that I do have 15 faith, because that allows you to use Flame Grant Me Strength. But that's not all, like that has a 15 faith requirement. But if we combine a Crystal Tia that we'll talk about in a little while, you would be even able to use Golden Bow, which is going to increase your damage by 15% and your damage negation by 10%. And like I said, since this is not a very stat hungry build, this is something that you can manage to pull off. So the Crystal Tias, like I said, you're going to be needing a Faith Nut Crystal Tia that would allow you to cast Golden Bow whenever you're going to start a fight, or whenever you do need to buff yourself, and then you can have the Thorny Crack Tier to make the consecutive attacks increase the attack power of your attacks. But this one right here could be interchanged, or for example, any of right here could be interchanged for something different, like Rainbow's Crystal Tier, or just the regular Crystal Tiers that you would use as a support kind of thing. Just to have in mind that if we have it set up right here, this is going to potentialize our damage even more. And just like that, you have the best build for the Falx to increase the damage as much as humanly possible, and to always have buffs and increase and extra damage at all times. Like I said, it's a very versatile Ash of War, because the Ash of War has a lot of maneuverability, so that you can use it depending on the situation and however you would want to use it. If you need to chase the boss, it's a very mobile enemy, it's a very mobile boss, then you can chase it with the Ash of War, you can charge the Ash of War to deal more damage. If you know that you have a window of opportunity that you can use to abuse the extra flurry of attacks, that is going to increase your damage with Millicent Prosthesis, with the Wing Sword Insignia, with the Crystal Tia. Everything about this build is focused on damage, and like I said, it's a very versatile, and in PvP these things are monstrous. As a matter of fact, these are one of the most hated weapons right now on PvP, until they manage to patch it, because the tracking on this thing is just monstrous. It's just tremendously monstrous. Anyways, if you like the content, like it, never super appreciate it. And also, you today, you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You're in the day, gorgeous and beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, have a beautiful day, and goodbye.